Welcome back to another episode of Feelin the Healin with Foltzy. I'm very excited today about my guest. Kind of a unique opportunity. We're kind of going outside the box a little bit. We're still talking about life journey. This guest today is a wife and a mother. In fact, she's the first guest we've had that's been a family member of a previous guest. So Bailey McCachren, my softball phenomenal guest, this is her mother, Brandy McCachren, and I'm having Brandy here today to tell her story about her life's journey, how she's navigated through a very difficult time, and how she's just recently dealt with a healing part at an older age, which is very remarkable. She's overcome a lot of very much unusual odds in her circumstance, which we're going to find out here a little bit. So Brandy, thanks for being here. We're going to talk about your book that you've written as a first-time author. I think that's pretty cool because one day I hope to write a book, so I'm hoping that you can help me out.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and this is the book right here. We'll talk more about it. Well, actually, we're going to talk about it as we go along here. That's what this is all about, is how this came about. So tell me about the inspiration behind the book. What inspired you to write Dandelion Resilience? And like, where did that come from? And let's just start there.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Do we need to break it down into sub questions?
It's I don't think it's just one thing. I think I know that I have always desired to write a book.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what about, and I knew I could use my personal story or journey as part of that book, but it wasn't until, recently, I guess a year and a half, 2 years ago, that it kind of dawned on me that, well, maybe my message can help someone else. And so I kind of just took it all together and put it together and put it on paper, and it was a book.
All right, so now that you've kind of opened the door up a little bit here, let's start back at your younger years. Let's start there, and let's now open Pandora's box here, and I think that's going to escalate a lot of other more questions about where this is going and what it's going to be a very useful tool for, I think, a lot of people, not just in what you went through, but other things. Mm-hmm. But let's go back to the younger years of Brandy.
Okay. So actually Pandora's box is in the book.
Oh, okay.
So kudos. 42 years old, I had an interesting situation happen where I was introduced to some biological family members, and did not know them, didn't know that they existed, and did not know that they knew that I existed. So it kind of startled me a little bit, and it emotionally shook me up. And I went to what I call and refer to in the book as Pandora's box, which is a memory chest. And in that memory chest had my case file from social services and my life book that my social workers had done with me throughout my younger years, and then just some, artifacts of my life. So where it started was at 7 years old, I was relinquished from my mother's care to the state, which is considered foster care system, and that was my mother's wishes. She decided that she didn't want me anymore. And from there, I went through multiple homes. I went through mental health hospitals, group homes, and luckily I landed in a long-term foster care home that saw me through aging out. So I aged out of care, and then the rest is history.
I think I didn't understand this much until roughly about 6 months ago when I went to a fundraiser, but I know people don't understand the aging out process where you just don't have an adopted family and you age out at what, 18 or?
Back then it was 18. I know that legislation is trying to change that. Well, it's 21. In some state, it depends on what agency. There's private care, there's state care, so it just depends on what program you're a part of. But the program I was in was 18 years old, and basically the foster care or the support that is given to the family ends at that aging out process. And so the subsidy, just all the resources that they receive to take care of you ends. And so typically you are on your own.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I think people need to understand, that aging out in general is a very rough thing. I mean, the percentage, let's talk about just females. What's that percentage that they even get out and are productive?
I know overall less than 10% of aging out youth, is what we're referred to as, are considered successful young adults, meaning that independent and are either working or obtaining education. The results are pretty staggering for individuals ending up in incarceration, homelessness, substance use,
yeah.
welfare. The list
Yeah.
just keeps going on and on.
Yeah, I know. When I went to that fundraiser, I was shocked at just the statistics. It was very
It's
gut
heartbreaking.
wrenching. Yeah. So let's kind of jump back a minute and take some of the heavy off for a minute. So Dandelion Resilience, where does that name come from?
Yeah, it was a story that I learned. It was my first foster home that I was placed into. And interesting, back in the days, you were locally placed in a home. And so when I was taken from my home and placed into a foster home, I still went to the same elementary school. So, and I repeated the first grade because I failed the first grade. So luckily, I do remember being in an elementary school that was very compassionate and very helpful during that time. And I remember my teacher telling me the story about dandelions and how they are wish makers. Their seeds, you blow on the seeds,
Mm-hmm.
and they go and spread themselves. And so she actually had me blow on a dandelion, and because she knew I was struggling, apparently. I don't remember this situation, but I just remember she telling me the tale of the dandelion. And so when you think about dandelion, it's just the natural, everybody automatically thinks, adversity, thriving, and it just was a good fit for my book. And that's, it's etched on my arm forever.
There you go. And what's cool about that story is, here's a teacher who, in a moment of time, knew, like you said, knew you were struggling with something and came up with something. This is when you were young.
Yeah, I was 7 years old.
And you have, and they took the time out to say what they said, did what they did, and that stuck.
Mm-hmm.
That's an impact. And kudos to that teacher, that what they did was change the life. I mean, you really think about it. I mean, you may not have known it back then, but now looking back on it, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I talk about that in the book, how, you have to stay resilient to appreciate those individuals.
Yeah.
I always question, even as an adult, as a professional, where does resiliency come from? Are you just born with it, or is it nurture, or, and, I've come to realize it's people like that teacher and other individuals I talk about in the book that kept pushing me to keep moving. And I think that's where the resilience comes in.
And I think it's a big lesson that we need to learn as human beings, is that if you see a moment, you stop and you take that moment and you help somebody. Because I think we get so caught up and we're just so like, I'll let the next person do it. And that's shame on us for doing that. I
Yeah,
think
I'm guilty of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we all are. And a lot of it is fear. You know, what are we walking into? I think people, oftentimes are fearful of, I don't know anything about this. I have no business being here, you
Yeah.
know. So, yeah, I'm just as guilty as much as I want to do things and I want to be that person.
But I think we do. I think
Yeah,
we all do.
in our way.
I know you do, and I know it's just, could we all recognize stuff more? Probably, and that's a good takeaway from all this is maybe we all need to open our eyes a little bit to the needs of some folks every now and then that we kind of don't see because of busyness.
And I think that's why the profession I went into.
Yeah.
Well, and we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
But
All right. So, just for a little nugget here, what are some of the key themes in the memoir?
Choice, the ability to choose, transformation, growing and transforming, and just keep pushing through. I mean, if you give up, that's it.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the piece that I am so amazed by when I look back on my story is I just kept putting one foot forward. I don't know how. I really don't. There were some very tough, difficult things. I mean, we'll go back to, I come from a mental health background and working with mental health. So I go back to, I did, and I talk about it in my book, I did try to die by suicide. I did try to take that out because it was just so hard. But for whatever reason, I was spared. And that had to count for something in my life, right? I mean, I just couldn't allow that to just be the answer. Just, so at some point I had a choice to make.
Yeah.
And
you have to move forward.
And it was difficult, but it was the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Yeah. Well, you're here to make a difference.
Tell the story.
Tell the story. So, I mean, I think I need to break the tension here a little bit before you start getting me all, maybe I have to ask for a tissue. What was the writing process like? Tell me about the challenges and all that.
Well, that might take a minute, but bear with me. My husband was the one that put this into motion, honestly. He knew I had a desire to share my story in an appropriate setting and a manner and it be in a positive way. But he kind of propelled that to fruition. It was difficult because I knew, one, I was not a healed person. I was working in the field that I chose. I loved working as a school counselor. It was some of the hardest days with students because I was working with students that I once was. And I had to do everything I had told my students to do. I had to walk the walk, and so I dug deep, put my big girl pants on, is what they say.
Yeah.
And so for me, the challenge was I had to re-traumatize myself from everything that I had pushed. And I even say in the book, God gave me the ability to forget. And when I say forget, and I know that you never forget, I forgot. I pushed it, I suppressed it so deep and buried it that I had forgot, I literally forgot that I had a past. Mm-hmm. Because I had such a desire to move forward. And so, I had to unearth all that stuff and I had to deal with it. And I had to emotionally prepare myself on any given day. I was reading my case files and there was a lot of stuff in there that I was not aware of. And it hurt. and it was very painful. So the writing process is from an emotional standpoint was very difficult. But once I got beyond that and I actually counseled myself through that, I could actually start writing. So my journey was I started April a year ago, so a year and a half ago, basically. And I didn't know anything about writing. I don't even like to read, really. So, I mean, I like to read educational stuff,
Yeah.
but not just,
Just,
leisure.
Yeah.
So I enrolled in this class that had been given, this resource was given to me, and it was, I met with the book coach, and she hosted a class, a weekly class, so I enrolled in that, and I was in there every week. I dedicated, myself to that every week, and I learned. I just learned, how do you start? Where do you start? So I was clueless when I went into this, and that was very helpful. And then finally somebody in my class said, in my group said, just start writing, because I didn't know where to start. And I was like, but I don't have a title yet. And she was like, your title will come to you. Just start writing, journal, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And let me tell you, the second I started writing, and I didn't start writing until August, because I went overseas, came back, and I was like, okay, this is the date I'm setting to just put pen to paper. And I started writing, and I could not stop writing. And it was just like unearthing everything from my past, journaling everything. And then it became, I had to, compartmentalize and start organizing my thoughts. And so the process, but once you start, if you just start, it's
not too bad.
It's not bad at all. It was the before.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was, and I'm sure the book was, in the long run, it was very healing for you. I mean, this is probably a way that you were able to, again, probably
process everything.
Yes.
On my terms.
Uh-huh.
And that was important.
And you needed to do that.
Yeah.
This is the stuff you probably counsel. You probably wouldn't tell kids, bury it. Don't ever leave it.
Well, I wouldn't say bury it, but I would tell them that you have a choice of, you need to decide what you're in control of.
Yeah.
All this other stuff, you have no control over. But you have you're in control of what you do with the information given. And so it was very, it was a roller coaster.
I'm sure. So based on that, I guess.
But very rewarding.
I'm sure.
Writing has always been very therapeutic for me, and you'll read that in my book. When I was younger, I would just go pen to paper, and there's some writings in there of mine that was in the memory box.
Yeah.
So, so it just goes to show how much pain I was in at the time. So the writing part was very therapeutic in itself, and I knew it would be.
Tell me about the reflection section in this book. I know there's one in there. Tell me about.
Yeah, there's reflections at each chapter. It's called Seeds of Thoughts, and there's a particular thought. Seeds of vulnerability, seeds of sacrifice, seeds of empathy. So, and that was my healing journey. I had to process vulnerability and what that looked like for me, and in order for me to move forward. Seeds of forgiveness, and that was a tough one for me, because I had become cynical of forgiving anybody who had harmed me. So
I'm sure.
So, the nuggets in there are to help the reader if they're struggling with something, past trauma, or just, maybe they're struggling with something right now and they don't know how, they're stuck and they don't know how to get beyond that point. It's a reflection for them in their journey. So it's a journal for them as well, where they can write. I pose some, food for thoughts, some questions to help them kind of get unstuck.
I guess that kind of answers another question I had. I thought about the impact that what you intend on making with people with this book, that overall impact. And they kind of answered a little bit of that, but if you can expand on that, maybe, I don't know.
I think the broader message I would love to be out there is that you're never alone. I felt alone. all the time. There's, whether you understand or not, going back to our initial conversation, empathy plays a huge part in the healing process. Other people's empathy, just, gosh, it's one of those messages I just wish that would resonate with everyone, that you're never alone. There's someone out there that has either been in a similar situation or that can help connect you with someone who can understand better your situation. And then also, I think it's important from an educational standpoint that for me, and Matt, you've heard me say this many times as long as I've known you, life skills. I will never be where I am today without a life skills program that I had gone through in the foster care system. It set me up for success. It set me up for independence. And those are teaching social and life skills to children and adolescents is so critical, and we've gotten away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And if kids don't have that to fall on as their support, and that's all they have, which is all I had, where do they go? What do they do? And so the bigger picture is, I want to be an advocate for life skills programming. I want getting back to the basics with kids. And essentially, I tell my students this all the time. I want to teach you how to be your own counselor, where you never need me. Although
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a counselor, I don't want you to have to rely on me. I want to be your ally. I want to be your, I want to be your cheerleader. I don't want you to have to be with a counselor for life.
Yeah.
I want you to learn from your experiences.
You know,
Does
I
that
think,
make sense?
yeah.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think as we're in this age now where younger people with social media and instant gratification, it's so difficult. I think those life skills you're talking about. Life skills take time, they take energy, they take choices,
Mm-hmm.
development, and that's a hard thing these days. And yes, I think what you're talking about is critical. Let's go make us $1 million and figure out how to do that.
Okay, well, I'm all for it, because apparently it's I talk to people and they know my passion for life skills programming, but where does it start?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just little me, not little, but I don't have I don't have those connections.
Yeah.
How do we get it back in schools? How do we, it comes from the top, and I don't have that kind of power.
Well, there's always a start. Maybe this is the start.
So.
You got to blow on the dandelion, right? We got to spread the seeds. Maybe this is what today's all about.
And I guarantee you, if you talk to any other kid that has aged out of foster care, they had support from whatever agency they were in, whether it was private care or it was the public care system. They were involved in some kind of life skill strategy program, independent living program. And is contributing to their success. I have to believe that, because if you look at my story it's no different from anybody else's story from the background, but what I chose to do with it.
What do you think about that sometimes? Thinking about that, talking about you compared to others, looking back on your bringing this up. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, like there's the 10% that make it out, and you're in that 10%. Does that ever
I struggled.
Really think about, like, hey, you're the one, the life skill, you took it, you accepted it, you did it, but looking back on it, you're like, wow, I could have been one of the 90%.
I struggled a long time with it. Why did I beat the odds? Why was I the lucky one? And that's what they call us, the lucky one.
Yeah.
I still, to this day, it kind of tears me up thinking about it, because I work with students that I don't know if they will survive.
You don't know if they'll be a lucky one.
I don't know.
Gosh, that's.
It's hard. It's a hard pill to
Yeah,
swallow.
we're getting a little teary-eyed again. We might need to move along to what's next for Brandy now. What's next for Brandy after this book? We'll dive deep again in a minute. But what's next for Brandy?
Hopefully, become more of an advocate. I struggle with the fact that I haven't been more. I haven't done more. I haven't been that voice. And I realized in this writing that it was because I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. And I talk about it in a sense that I wasn't, when I allowed myself to be vulnerable as a child, something bad always happened or followed up. So I made a choice to, bury it deep, leave it behind, and just start my life. And so as an adult, I haven't shared my story. You didn't really know my story. And, a small circle of friends do and have. But in essence, I just didn't talk about it. I didn't think it was relevant, really. I didn't want people to perceive me as any different as them. And in writing this book, I realized that, no, I just didn't want to disrupt my comfortable life. And that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I was comfortable. I was content. I was, I didn't want my story to be the face of me. And so I struggle with the fact of knowing that I could have done more and I could have been more of a voice in the last 20 years, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be vulnerable. And now I bear it all in the book. I do. There's not a rock unturned in there. So
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sorry if you learned something you don't want to know about me. So here I am, and Lord, just use me wherever you want me to go. Really,
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm here. I'm ready. And maybe it's now because I'm more knowledgeable, emotionally prepared. I can do it. I'm strong enough now.
Tony Robbins talks about these 6 human needs that are really they're what we need to thrive. Certainty, which when you're vulnerable, there's uncertainty, which we need, but there's certainty, which we all need certainty. We all know that we're going to be okay, and the family we're with is going to be there. There's also significance, so we want to be someone of significant. Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel like you're significant, then that can cut you deep. Mm-hmm. There's connection and love, so we all want to have connection. We all want to have love. That's a very powerful one. Mm-hmm. But then the last 2 are really guided towards really kind of your spirit, your soulful human need. And one is growth, which I look at you and I see this woman who has come through this difficult time, who kept growing, who kept pushing, and by doing so, and even through this, you're continuing to grow. And the other one is giving, and by doing this, you're really giving yourself. You've given yourself up. Like you said, you've bared all to this book, and you've opened up Pandora's box for all to see. But yet, you're giving that to people, and I really hope that this blows up. And people can look at this, even if it doesn't, even if it helps one person.
I'm good with that.
If it helps one person, that can change another life, mm-hmm. is huge. But we know better than that.
Chain reaction.
Yep. We know that we're here to showcase something that's going to make a difference, and that's exciting. And with that, and again, I'm getting a little bit deep again. What about a quote? Is there a particular quote in this book that's a sounding board or something that you really like?
There's quite a few things that I have heard along the way in my life that I think I go back to in the book. And one is I had heard a few years ago, God sets the lonely in families, something of that nature. And I never really gave it much thought. And then in writing this book and it's biblical, and so I do the research. It's biblical and everything, and I didn't get to really choose my family. No one gets to choose their family, and my family decided they didn't want me anymore. I was disposable, and but God really had a way of placing me in a environment, in a support system at the most critical time in my life. And I just, it resonates with me so deeply.
Yeah.
And then there's another one, I think it's something that I said that has been quoted on social media a couple times is, I aim to spread my seeds, going back to what is next for you, just that you have that you can grow and you can transform. You don't have to be the product of your past or your environment, or your, the brokenness.
Yeah.
You do have to do work though.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean, it's not going to come easy. It's not a sprint. It definitely was a marathon.
Yeah.
I mean, it's spanned over 4 decades for me. So, give yourself a little grace and to love yourself.
Yeah.
Like
That's a tough one
that's
sometimes.
a tough one. It's like be compassionate with yourself. We always tell people be compassionate and be, but we never tell them enough to do that for yourself. Love yourself. Give yourself grace. Give yourself time. Be patient with yourself. Like, don't be forced. And so I think, I don't know that it's necessarily a quote, but it's definitely something I reflect on. Self-love is a big, big part of the healing journey. And, that's something I never had experienced or exposed to. And that, I will say in closing, the very end of the book, I was working with a soon-to-be high school student and a graduate. And we were doing a lesson on preparing for the future. And the question was, what is your why? No one has ever asked me in the 48 years of my life what my why was. And I'm telling you, when I say that I've gone through therapy, I've gone through a lot of therapists. And no one's asked me, who are you? In that whole process, no one, and it hit me. I remember sitting in my office and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, this is it. This is the bulk of it. And so I went home and I reflected on that. What is my why? And in that moment it crystallized for me, and with further discussion with the student, we talk about, well, how do you develop that why? If you don't know your why, how do you develop it? And so it was very fascinating to take a lesson that was taught to a senior in high school and apply it to myself at 48 years old. 40.
You did your own therapy again.
There you go. And it was it was just a wonderful expression of, you're never too old to learn something new or to redefine yourself or define yourself, because I never defined myself as a person.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the biggest, it's not necessarily a quote, but takeaway. How can you move forward if you don't know what your why is? What's your steps if you don't know where you're going?
You're kind of killing my thunder on my last question, where I ask the Brandy McCachren keys or strategies to success in life, but I think you kind of hit on some of it right then.
Yeah. Well,
right? But I also want to ask what your superpower would be. If you had a superpower, what would it be? Just for grins and giggles.
I feel like once you read the book, you're going to see that I had a superpower, and I think we all have that same superpower, the power of choice.
Yeah.
And I think I will always go back to that, because things could look very differently in my life if I chose differently.
Yeah.
And I thank God that I was given that intuition to choose wisely. and because, as you said, I have a wonderful husband, a wonderful family. We're not perfect. It's not easy, but we manage. And, you know, I can't imagine not living this life. I'm so grateful and appreciative that I chose to not be the product of my situation.
See, and that may be another strategy and key is the wise choices.
Yeah. So
not always easy to make wise choices.
No, and I failed.
Yeah.
Trust me, I still fail every day, as a parent, as a wife, as a a professional. I mean, like, that's part of your learning, though. Like, you have to fail and fall flat on your knees to move forward and to grow and to transform. And so, you have to fail, but you also have a choice of what you're going to do with those failures. Are you going to allow them to dig a hole for you and where you can never get up and rebound, or are you going to use that experience wisely?
Learn and grow from it. Move forward.
Yeah.
Well, the book, Dandelion Resilience, Finding the Freedom to Bloom. Excited to have this come out. This is going to come out when?
Next Tuesday,
the 17th, September 17th.
Mm-hmm. And the first 24 hours are very critical.
So how do people go about? Can they order this on
Amazon?
Amazon.
It would be on all your you can go to any of your bookstores, order it online. Barnes and Nobles. Amazon's probably the easiest. What everybody knows. You can download it for an e-reader. Yeah.
It's exciting. I'm extremely proud of you.
Oh, well, thank you.
I mean, not everybody can go through what you went through, first of all, and came through and rose from the ashes, so to speak, that 10%, and then live your life, bring it all back up and put it in a book. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, and going back, I wanted to mention too, I recall many a times minimizing my situation, right? You say, to relive it, and I always minimize that everybody else's situation. There's worse situations than mine out there, right? I mean, and that's just a self-preservation that we do. We minimize our situation to just, cope. It's our coping mechanism. But big or small, if it impacts your life, you've got to use it as experience. And I realized, there's worse situations out there, of course, but mine was traumatic to me.
Yeah.
In my life, and that was a big thing to come to terms with,
Yeah.
Because I didn't think there was anything special about my story. You hear about thousands of kids going through the system. Why is my story any different, So it was interesting to come to terms with that. So I guess the message there is, big or small, don't compare it. Embrace it. And endure the challenges and learn from it and transform from it. And just, know that this is part of the process.
Well, Brandy, you're a phenomenal woman.
Well, I don't know about that.
And I really appreciate you taking time out to spend with me and talk about your journey, the writing process, just everything that you've been through. And I think it's really amazing that like I said, you've gone through this and you're here today, and you're an amazing person. And I'm just thrilled to say I know you, and you're a friend of mine.
That's funny. It's come full circle, huh? From way back in the day, you didn't even know.
Well, thanks for being on this episode.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.